The old man sat alone at the corner of the base commissary café, a chipped porcelain mug of black coffee steaming in front of him. He wore a weathered olive drab jacket, the kind you couldn't find in stores anymore, with the patches long faded and the sleeves a bit too short for his thick forearms. His hands, large and scarred, wrapped around the mug like it was the last warm thing left in the world. His back was straight. His eyes were alert. Most people didn't look at him twice. To the untrained eye, he was just another military retiree, one of those guys who showed up early for the veteran discounts, maybe told tall tales to anyone who'd listen. But something about the way he carried himself made others keep their distance. There was a silence around him, not from loneliness but from presence. He was a statue no one wanted to disturb. Until that morning. 3 young soldiers walked in, laughing too loudly, already halfway through whatever inside joke they'd started in the parking lot. Fresh cuts, high fades, combat boots still glossy. One of them, the one with the sharp jawline and too much energy, noticed the old man and nudged his buddies. "Check it out." Another one of those Cold War fossils, he muttered with a grin, not quietly enough. His friend chuckled. Dude probably thinks he could still win a fistfight with a drone. They didn't stop walking. In fact, they took the booth just behind him, loud, obnoxious, their voices bouncing off the sterile tile and plastic. The old man didn't move, didn't flinch. Just took another sip of coffee and kept staring out the window like he'd been waiting for something he didn't want to see arrive. A waitress came by, a young woman with tired eyes and a notepad full of half-legible scribbles. "You want a refill, sir?" she asked softly, gesturing to his mug. He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you kindly." She smiled a little and poured from the pot without another word. As she turned to leave, one of the younger men, the loud one, called after her. "Hey, sweetheart, mind giving Grandpa here a muffin on us? I think he needs something to soften that scowl." The old man said nothing. The waitress gave the soldiers a look, but they just grinned like it was the funniest thing they'd said all week. And that's when one of them noticed the jacket. "Wait a second," said the third guy, squinting. "Is that?" "Nah. No way that's a real 75th patch. That thing looks like it came out of a thrift shop." The leader leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Yo, old-timer, where'd you get that jacket? Army surplus? Or are you one of those guys who buy decorations online and pretend they were somebody?" Still, the man didn't speak. His hand simply tightened on the mug. Just slightly, barely noticeable. Then he stood, slowly, deliberately, and turned. The moment he faced them, the air changed. The joking stopped. For just a second, all 3 of them looked into a pair of steel-gray eyes that had seen things they couldn't imagine. And they hesitated. But only for a moment. "You boys need to learn respect," the old man said, voice low and firm. "No theatrics. No shouting." "Oh yeah," the loud one said, puffing up. "Or what, Grandpa? You gonna teach us?" There was a pause. The kind of pause you hear in a movie before something explodes. Then the man stepped closer. "Not much. Just a foot. I led men better than you into hell and brought them back again. You don't know what respect is," he said calmly. "But you're about to learn." The loud one laughed, but it was nervous now. "What are you, some retired drill sergeant?" A voice came from behind the cafe counter. The manager, an older civilian who'd worked on base since before these kids were born, stood there with a look that made the color drain from his face. "Boys," he said, barely above a whisper. "That's General Hawthorne." Silence. Total, crushing silence. The air in the room collapsed. General Hawthorne. The name hit like a gunshot. Not because they knew him. They didn't, not really, but because they'd heard it. Everyone had. It was the kind of name passed down in war stories and training camps. The kind of name that earned its own gravity. Special Forces. Black Ops. The kind of guy you didn't find in books, but whose reputation haunted the margins of classified files. The soldiers stood frozen, their earlier bravado evaporating. Hawthorne didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply adjusted the cuff of his jacket and turned to leave. But then something strange happened. The youngest of the 3, the quiet one who hadn't said much, stepped forward. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "is it true you led Operation Broken Dagger?" Hawthorne paused. Then, finally, he nodded. "Yes." The soldier swallowed. "My uncle, he served under you. He said you saved his life. He talks about you like you were a ghost. Said you walked into a firestorm and brought his whole team out." Hawthorne met his gaze. For the first time, something softened behind those eyes. Not quite warmth, but a flicker of recognition, of memory. "What was your uncle's name?" he asked. "Staff Sergeant Kilpatrick." A slow breath. A nod. "Good man. Brave. Smart. He was one of the best. And then he left. Just like that. No medals. No speeches. No threats. The cafe was silent for a long time after the door shut behind him. No one quite knew what to say, but that was only the beginning. Because within 24 hours, the story hit the base like wildfire. And the names of those 3 soldiers, especially the loud one, were suddenly the talk of every office, every barracks, every break room. And General Hawthorne? He was about to be pulled back into a world he thought he'd left behind. By the next morning, the incident at the commissary had made its way through every corridor of Fort Wickham. In break rooms, training yards, even whispered between sips of coffee in high-ranking offices. Everyone was talking about the confrontation between the 3 junior soldiers and the ghost of a legend, General Elias Hawthorne. Most stories were exaggerated. Some claimed Hawthorne had slammed one of the kids through a table, others that he'd given a 20-minute speech that left them in tears. None of that happened. But what did happen? The silence, the presence, the way those boys shrunk under his gaze. That was more than enough to turn rumor into folklore. And while the base buzzed, Hawthorne himself had disappeared again. Not far, just off-grid. As usual, he lived in a quiet cabin just outside the base perimeter. Nothing special, nothing grand. Just a 2-room log structure, some pine trees, a rusting Ford truck, and a flagpole out front where the wind always seemed to blow at the perfect angle. Inside, the walls were bare except for one old photograph, framed in dull wood. A group of 6 men, dusty and grinning, standing in the doorway of a military chopper. All of them were gone now, except one. Hawthorne sat in a worn leather chair by the window, a rifle leaning against the wall nearby, and a half-finished crossword on the armrest. He hadn't turned on the TV in days. He didn't need to. He knew how the world was turning. You could hear it in the silence between news updates. It wasn't peace. It was the breath before something snapped. And then the knock came. Not loud, not aggressive, but precise, rhythmic. 3 short raps. A pause. 2 more. Just like it used to be. He stood slowly, not from weakness, but from memory. The weight in his joints wasn't from age. It was from history. He opened the door. On the porch stood a woman in her 40s, tall, in civilian clothes, but carrying herself like she hadn't left the service in spirit. Her jaw was tense, her hands in the pockets of a gray jacket, her eyes unreadable. "General," she said, "you're 2 years late, Colonel Brooks." She nodded once. "You weren't easy to find." "I wasn't hiding." "Then you're the only ghost who isn't." He stepped aside without another word. She entered. They didn't sit, didn't shake hands. This wasn't a reunion. This was business. Ugly business. "There was a breach," she said. 2 nights ago. Black Site 7. Hawthorne's eyes flicked up. "That's not possible." "It wasn't supposed to be." "Casualties?" "Everyone." A long silence. Brooks continued. "The site was stripped. Not just weapons. Data. Files. Operation Black Lantern was recovered." His jaw clenched. "I ordered that sealed 20 years ago. Somebody just unsealed it. With precision. With inside knowledge." A pause. "They're hunting ghosts, General," she said, "starting with the ones who knew the truth." "And what do you want from me?" Her voice dropped. "I want you to finish what you started." He didn't respond immediately, just turned and looked out the window, toward the tree line where the sun filtered through the leaves in quiet gold. "Everyone I trusted is dead," he said. "Not everyone." She tossed a thin black folder onto the table. It slid open just slightly, revealing 2 names, one of which he hadn't seen in years. One that made something old and broken twitch in his chest. He opened the folder fully, and there it was. Captain M. Reyes. His breath hitched. Not enough to see, but enough to feel. "She's alive?" he asked. Brooks nodded. "Hiding. Off-grid. But she left a signal last month. She's calling the old team back in." "No," he said. "There is no team. Not anymore. But someone out there thinks you're still dangerous enough to be worth killing. They're not coming after memories. They're coming after you." She turned toward the door. "We don't need a general, sir. We need a ghost." As she stepped outside, she added, without turning back, "We'll be waiting. 1 week. Anchorage." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and Hawthorne stood alone, staring down at the file. At names. At maps. At a past he'd buried so deep it didn't even feel like his anymore. Until now. The plane touched down on the edge of a forgotten airstrip in southern Alaska, where the wind felt like knives and the silence stretched for miles. Hawthorne stepped off without a word, wearing the same jacket he'd worn at Fort Wickham, his eyes scanning the frost-covered landscape with that old habit always looking for cover, exits, threats. Waiting by a blacked-out SUV was Colonel Brooks, now in full tactical gear. She didn't salute, just nodded. "No one's used this airfield in 10 years, she said. "Perfect," Hawthorne replied. They drove in silence for miles, the tires crunching over frozen gravel, past forests that seemed to lean in as if listening. Eventually, the road ended at an abandoned ranger station. Two figures emerged from the shadows. Hawthorne stepped out slowly. The first man was thick, older, with an uneven beard and a prosthetic leg that clicked when he shifted. "Jesus Christ," he said with a half-smile. "They really dragged you out of whatever cave you were hiding in." "Good to see you too, Matheson," Hawthorne said. The other figure stepped forward. Slim, dark eyes, black tactical gear, no insignia, and that unmistakable stillness, like a coiled spring that never really uncoils. "Reyes," he said. She didn't smile, didn't blink, just nodded once. "General." He hadn't seen her in over 14 years. Last time they'd spoken, it was in the rain, under the belly of a burning helicopter, screaming over the noise as they left bodies behind. He remembered the look in her eyes then. Cold, focused, heartbreaking. She looked exactly the same now. Inside the station, they unfolded a set of maps on the floor. Old files, photographs, infrared images, and at the center of it all a name. Sable. The name was circled in red ink. Again and again, like someone had done it in a trance. Hawthorne felt the hairs on his arms rise. "I thought Sable was a ghost," he said. "He was," Reyes answered. "Now he's not." Sable had been one of them, once. A specialist in off-book cyber intelligence and infiltration. Recruited out of a classified NSA Skunkworks program. Until he snapped. Until he went rogue. Disappeared into the fog of post-war politics and black market tech. He'd been presumed dead in 2013. He wasn't. "We believe he's building something," Brooks said. "Or maybe already has." The data stolen from Black Site 7? It included the full archive of Project Bellwether. That stopped everyone cold. "Bellwether was never activated," Matheson growled. "It is now," Reyes said quietly. Hawthorne leaned in, eyes sharp. "So what are we dealing with?" Brooks spoke, her voice low. "He's using old predictive warfare algorithms, the ones we shelved because they were too accurate, too dangerous. He's enhanced them with AI cores we never authorized, tracking social instability, defense patterns, economic trends. He's not attacking with bullets. He's planning collapse." "Timing?" Hawthorne asked. "We don't know. But if he went dark for 12 years and is only surfacing now, it's happening soon." Hawthorne straightened. "Then we go after him." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Just like that." He looked around the room. Old faces. Broken tools. Ghosts. "No," he said. "Not just like that. We're not soldiers anymore. We're relics. But we're the only ones who know how to kill another relic." They spent the next 48 hours prepping. Calling in favors. Pulling out stashed gear, fake IDs, tracking old contacts. Reyes secured an encrypted satellite uplink. Matheson rebuilt a drone from parts stored under a barn. Brooks hacked into a DARPA feed and disappeared 3 times from the global net to avoid detection. On the third night, a coded message arrived through a hidden frequency, a voice modulated beyond recognition. "You should have stayed buried, General." It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. And it came with coordinates. Deep in the Mongolian steppe. The team looked at each other. No words. Just the quiet acknowledgement of what came next. A mission that was never supposed to exist. A war no one would ever know happened. They packed light, left no trace, and boarded an unmarked transport under cover of night. As the engines roared to life, Reyes sat beside Hawthorne. "Why did you come back?" she asked, voice barely audible over the noise. He didn't look at her. "Because someone has to bury the dead." The Mongolian steppe stretched out like a frozen sea under the charcoal sky, broken only by distant ridgelines and the glow of something unnatural, something buried deep beneath the earth that pulsed faintly through the dark. The coordinates led them here. No roads, no towns, just wind, silence, and the faint echo of war. They set down the transport 6 clicks out and moved on foot. Hawthorne led. He always had. Reyes moved on his right, Matheson flanked left, Brooks covering the rear. Just like old times. But every step felt heavier than the last. This wasn't just another mission. This was the reckoning. They found the entrance built into the rock, seamless, hidden. Tech like that didn't exist when they served. But it did now. A biometric scanner flickered to life the moment Hawthorne approached. And then, inexplicably, it opened. "Why would it let us in?" Brooks muttered. Hawthorne's jaw tightened. "Because he wants us to." They descended into what looked like a bunker but felt more like a tomb. Cold steel. Low ceilings. The air tasted of ozone and dust. Every light turned on ahead of them, guiding, luring. They moved deeper. And then the voice came. Over hidden speakers. Calm. Familiar. Welcome home, Elias. Sable. He didn't sound mad. He didn't sound evil. He sounded disappointed. Like a teacher watching a student fail a test he thought they'd pass. I knew you'd come, Sable said. You were always the loyal one. The path ended at a massive blast door. It hissed open slowly. Beyond it, a chamber filled with screens. Data. Satellite feeds. AI computation models. And at the center, a man seated in a wheelchair. Gaunt. Hooked to wires. Breathing through a synthetic valve. But his eyes. Still sharp as razors. Sable, Hawthorne said. The man smiled weakly. You look old. You look dead. I am, he whispered. This is just the last flicker. Reyes raised her weapon. Stand down. Shut this all down, now. But Sable ignored her. He looked only at Hawthorne. You think I'm the villain, he said. But what did we do, Elias? We built a machine designed to predict war before it happened. To stop it. To control it. And the moment it worked too well, they shut us down. We shut it down, Hawthorne growled. Because it started targeting civilians. Journalists. Children. It predicted threats, Sable said, eyes burning. And it was right. You saw what happened after we killed it. How many coups, Elias? How many proxy wars? The world is a failing machine, and all I'm doing is replacing the pilot. He pressed a button on his chair. The screens came to life. Every major global conflict. Every economic collapse. All predicted. All coordinated. All happening now. Brooke stepped forward. You're destabilizing the world. I'm reshaping it. Reyes fired. Not to kill, but to disable the console. Sparks flew. Sable didn't flinch. You're too late, he whispered. It's already begun. The only way to stop it is to kill the core. But doing that will black out communications in half the hemisphere. Planes will fall. Satellites crash. Thousands will die instantly. Matheson grunted. And if we don't stop it? Billions. Hawthorne said nothing. He looked around the room at his team. At the monitors. At the ghost of a man he once trusted. And then he stepped forward. Sable, he said quietly, you always wanted to control the future. Yes, Sable whispered. Because people like us were the only ones who could. Hawthorne reached into his coat. Pulled out an old analog detonator, the kind they stopped using years ago. No digital trace. No override. You were wrong, Hawthorne said. He pressed the trigger. The chamber shook. Sable looked at him with something like peace. Thank you, he said. And closed his eyes. The team ran. Explosions followed. Fire bloomed through the tunnels like blooming thunder. They made it to the surface with seconds to spare, Reyes dragging Brooks, Matheson limping fast as his prosthetic would let him. The mountain behind them collapsed inward. Silence again. A new kind of silence. They set up camp that night under the stars. No radio. No signal. Just fire and frost. Reyes looked at Hawthorne. You did it, she said. No, he said. We stopped it. There's a difference. Brooks nodded. They'll never know what we did. Good, Hawthorne muttered. He stood, staring out into the night. And for the first time in years, he looked lighter. Not redeemed, but unburdened. He turned back to them. Let's go home.